The first time I realized love could be used like a weapon, I was standing barefoot in my own hallway, still weak from surgery, staring at the man I had nearly died to save. 6 months earlier, I had given him my kidney. 6 months later, I found him in my bed with my best friend. But even that wasn't the part that destroyed me. The part that destroyed me was what came after: the secrets, the timeline, the documents already prepared before I ever opened that bedroom door. The way I slowly understood that I had not just been betrayed, I had been handled, managed, positioned, used. My name is Leah. I was 29 years old when I learned that some people will let you bleed for them, smile while you heal, and then step over your body like you were only ever part of their plan. For 7 years, Marcus had been my whole life. Not in the dramatic way people say when they mean obsession. I mean in the ordinary, intimate, dangerous way. He was the person whose coffee order I knew by smell before he entered a room. The person whose footsteps I could recognize in the hallway of our apartment building. The person whose moods I could read from the sound of a door closing. I loved him in all the quiet ways that matter more than grand speeches. I learned the schedule of his work stress. I remembered which side of his neck tensed when he was trying not to panic. I knew when he needed space and when he only pretended he did. I knew how he looked at me when he was too tired to be charming and too honest to lie. I thought that kind of knowing meant safety. I was wrong. When Marcus got sick, it happened so fast it felt unreal. At first it was fatigue, then swelling, then tests, then more tests, then one sterile office, one doctor with careful eyes, and one sentence that changed everything. Severe renal failure. I still remember how cold that room felt, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the way Marcus stared at the floor as if maybe, if he didn't look up, the diagnosis would remain suspended in the air and never become real. The doctor was calm, professional, direct. Without a transplant within the year, the prognosis was grim. Afterward, Marcus sat in the car with both hands on the steering wheel, not driving, not speaking. His face looked older in that moment than I had ever seen it. Not because of the illness itself, but because of what illness does to pride. What it does to people who are used to being the strong one, the capable one, the man with the answer, the plan, the next move. "I'm not going to make you carry this," he said finally. I turned toward him. "We're married." He gave this small, bitter laugh. "That's exactly why." What he didn't know was that I had already made up my mind. I went through the testing process in secret. People like to imagine organ donation as one dramatic choice, one emotional moment where love triumphs and everything becomes cinematic. It isn't like that. It's paperwork and blood work and long hospital corridors and forms with language so precise it feels cruel. It's doctors making sure you understand the risks. It's statistics. It's probability. It's signing your name beside the possibility that the person you are trying to save may still leave you with less than you began with. I didn't tell Marcus because I didn't want gratitude to corner him. I didn't want obligation influencing his answer. I wanted it to be my decision, fully mine. If I was going to do this, I wanted to do it freely. When I was confirmed as a compatible donor, I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes afterward, with my hands shaking in my lap. I should have been terrified. I was. But under the fear, there was certainty. The night before the surgery, Marcus cried. He tried not to. He kept apologizing for it, which only made it harder to watch. We were in the hospital room with the television on mute, both of us pretending to look at it because looking at each other made everything too real. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. I remember reaching for his hand. My IV tape pulled against my skin. My throat felt tight. "If anyone does, it's you." He looked at me then, with red-rimmed eyes. "Why would you do this?" And I answered the way only someone deeply in love can answer. The way someone answers before life teaches her to protect herself. "Because I love you." The next morning, right before they rolled me into surgery, we locked eyes one last time. He looked like he wanted to say something important, something that would carry the weight of the moment. But all he managed was my name. Just my name. That was enough for me then. If you're already feeling where this story is going, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, because I promise you this is only the beginning, and what happened next was even colder than betrayal. The surgery was successful. That is the clean version, the medical version, the simple version. The real version is slower. It's waking up in pain you were told to expect but can never truly prepare for. It's trying to breathe without moving too much. It's learning the geography of your own body all over again because something inside you is missing now. And your body knows it even if your mind hasn't caught up. It's smiling weakly when nurses say you're doing great because gratitude is easier than honesty. Marcus recovered faster than I did. That's normal, they said. The recipient often stabilizes in a very different rhythm than the donor, they said. Your fatigue is normal, they said. Your body needs time, they said. In a year, maybe sooner, you'll feel like yourself again. I held on to that. For weeks, Marcus hovered around me like a changed man. He made soup. He adjusted pillows. He reminded me to rest. He took over grocery runs and laundry and anything involving stairs. Sometimes I would wake up from a midday sleep and find him looking at me with this unreadable expression, something between guilt and tenderness. I thought it meant the surgery had deepened our marriage. I thought surviving something together had made us stronger. There is a specific cruelty in realizing that while you were assigning meaning to someone's actions, they were only managing appearances. 6 months after the surgery, on a Saturday morning, I woke up happy. That sounds ridiculous now, but it's true. It was one of those mornings when pain had finally eased enough that hope returned before thought did. Marcus had supposedly been away on a work trip since Thursday, but when I walked into the living room, his jacket was on the couch. I smiled. He came home early, I thought. He's going to surprise me. I remember actually smoothing my hair with one hand before walking toward the bedroom. I remember how ordinary the apartment felt. The soft light through the curtains. The quiet. The stupid sweetness in my chest. Then I opened the door, and there they were. Marcus, Camille. My husband and my best friend since I was 8 years old. In my bed. The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was the sound of my life splitting open. I didn't scream. People always imagine screaming. But shock doesn't always sound like noise. Sometimes it sounds like nothing. Sometimes it freezes you so completely that your body refuses to help you. Camille pulled the sheet to her chest. Marcus sat up too fast. Both of them started to say my name at once, which somehow made it worse. 3 seconds passed. They felt longer than entire years. "Leah," Camille began. But Marcus cut in first. "We've been together for 4 months. Just like that. No denial, no confusion, no lie. A statement, an announcement. A correction to the reality I had apparently been the last person to know. 4 months. My brain did the math instantly. 4 months meant while I was recovering. 4 months meant while I was sleeping 12 hours a day. 4 months meant while he was tucking blankets around me and saying, "Rest, I've got everything." 4 months meant while my body was healing from surgery I had undergone for him, He was sleeping with her. I looked at his left hand. He had a ring on it. Not our ring. Not the simple band I had slid onto his finger on our wedding day. A different ring. My voice came out calm in a way that scared even me. "When did you get married?" Marcus dropped his eyes. Camille started crying. 3 weeks ago, he said. 3 weeks. 3 weeks earlier, he had told me he was leaving for a professional seminar. I stood there with one hand still on the doorknob and felt something inside me go perfectly still. Not break. Still. That is different. Broken things make noise. Still things become dangerous. Marcus got up and took a step toward me. "Leah, please, get out. Listen to me. Get out." Camille was shaking now, saying my name, saying this wasn't how they wanted me to find out, saying feelings were complicated, saying nothing that mattered. Marcus reached out again. "This house is mine, too." That sentence brought me back into my body more effectively than anything else had. "This house," I said quietly, "was mine before I ever met you." He said nothing. "Get out." And this time, something in my face must have convinced him. They left. I heard them gathering clothes, whispering, doors opening and closing, quick footsteps, then silence again. I sank to the hallway floor. No tears. Not yet. Only one thought moving in circles through my head. Was he already with her when I was on that operating table? I didn't have the proof then, but somewhere beneath the shock, I already knew the answer. The next few days were a blur of legal language and empty rooms. Marcus did not come back. He sent a lawyer. A lawyer. Not even a phone call. Not even the cowardice of trying to explain himself directly. Just a man in a gray suit who handed me an envelope with the emotional warmth of a utility bill. Divorce papers. Pre-filled. Prepared. Ready. Which meant he had planned this before I walked into that bedroom. Maybe before that morning. Maybe before that week. Maybe much earlier. I stared at the documents for nearly an hour before one detail snapped everything into focus. The apartment. The apartment I had bought with my savings 2 years before our marriage. The apartment I had later added him onto because I believed in us, because love had made generosity feel natural, because I had once thought, "What's mine is yours," sounded romantic instead of reckless. He was claiming half. Legally, my attorney explained, because his name was on the deed, he had rights. "We can fight it," she said, "but it will take time and money." Time and money were exactly what I didn't have. My recovery had dragged longer than expected. I still wasn't back at work full-time. Then, 1 week earlier, my employer had sent me a polished, careful email informing me that my position had been restructured. Restructured. A graceful corporate word for replaced. I sat alone in that kitchen, counting what remained of my life. An apartment under dispute. No salary. Legal fees. A body still tired in ways that felt deeper than sleep. And then Camille messaged me. I should have deleted it without opening it. I know that now. Instead, I read every word. "Leah, I want you to know Marcus always respected you. What happened between us wasn't planned. Feelings can't be controlled. I hope one day you can understand." Feelings can't be controlled. As if that sentence could erase 20 years of friendship. As if it could erase the fact that she had held my hand the night before my surgery. As if it could erase the way she had looked into my eyes and said, "Marcus is so lucky to have you." I read her message 3 times. Then something cold and solid formed inside me. Not grief. Steel. I typed a response. I didn't send it. I saved it. You already understand what you did. Soon, both of you will understand what it cost. The next morning, I went to a routine medical appointment, and my life changed again. "Leah," the doctor said gently, "you're pregnant." I stared at her. She kept talking. 7 weeks, approximately. Everything looked normal so far. We'd need follow-up blood work. She was smiling, but carefully, because she couldn't tell from my face whether this news was joy or disaster. 7 weeks. The baby was Marcus's. He had no idea. I sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes after that appointment without moving. People came and went. A receptionist asked twice if I was all right. I wasn't crying. I wasn't smiling. I was just trying to understand how one life can collapse and begin again in the same week. I decided to keep the baby in less than a minute. That part came from somewhere deeper than fear. What took longer was the second decision. Marcus would not know. Not yet. Maybe that sounds cruel. Maybe some people will judge it. But at that moment, I was physically weak, unemployed, legally exposed, emotionally gutted, and carrying the child of a man who had just betrayed me with my best friend and secretly married her. If I told him then, he would come back not out of love, but out of entitlement, guilt, confusion, or control. He would use lawyers, promises, obligations, anything. And I did not have the strength to fight a man who had already proven he could split his face in two and wear devotion in one room and deceit in another. So I made a promise to my child. You will never be used as a weapon, not by him, not by me. That night, unable to sleep, I started scrolling through old messages with Camille. I didn't know exactly what I was searching for, a clue maybe, a moment I had missed, a crack in the version of events I had been fed. And then I found it. 9 months earlier, Camille had written, "I ran into Dr. Renard at a party. He mentioned a patient waiting for a transplant. I immediately thought of Marcus. I hope he's okay." I read that message over and over. Dr. Renard was Marcus's nephrologist. A doctor doesn't casually discuss a patient's transplant status with someone at a party, not unless that person already knows, not unless the topic was brought there intentionally. Camille had known Marcus was sick before Marcus told me. She had known, and she said nothing. Why? That question kept me awake all night. I rebuilt the timeline piece by piece, message by message, memory by memory. The more I mapped it out, the uglier it became. Camille had been present for every vulnerable stage, every conversation, every doubt, every moment Marcus hesitated and said he couldn't let me do this, and every time she had been there with a soft smile and a gentle push. Let her choose. This is how Leah loves. You know she'd do anything for you. At the time, I thought she was supporting us. Now, I saw the possibility that she had been guiding us. And if she had, then the affair wasn't an accident. It was architecture. If this kind of slow burn betrayal is hitting hard, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Stories like this remind you that the truth never stays buried forever. And trust me, the next chapter changes everything. About a year later, my son was 3 months old. His name was Ethan. He slept like he was making up for every sleepless night I'd had while pregnant, and when he opened his eyes, I saw Marcus there in the shape of them. That hurt at first. Then it became complicated. Then it became irrelevant. Ethan wasn't a reminder of betrayal. He was proof that something good had survived it. By then, I was living in a tiny sublet studio my cousin helped me get. 28 square meters, just enough room for a crib, a narrow bed, a fold-out table, and the version of me I was still trying to rebuild. I settled the divorce quietly. My attorney thought I was making a mistake. She believed I should fight for the apartment. Maybe she was right. But I wanted one clean cut somewhere in all that mess. I didn't want to spend years tied to Marcus through hearings and signatures and negotiations. So I walked away from what was legally arguable because emotionally I needed the severance more than the asset. At night, while Ethan slept, I worked. I had a background in financial analysis, and freelance work was the only thing flexible enough to fit around a baby and a healing body. At first, it was tiny contracts, then more, then referrals. I took everything I could handle, and sometimes a little more. I learned to work in silence, with one eye on spreadsheets and the other on the baby monitor. I learned how much exhaustion a person can survive when there is no other option. 3 clients became 5. 5 became 8. I wasn't fast, but I was exact. Exactness became my reputation. Then one evening, on a call with a new prospective client, my life changed for the second time. Her name was Victoria. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, elegant in a way that made other people sit straighter around her. She ran an investment operation and had spent 2 decades surviving in rooms where hesitation was treated like weakness. She listened to my analysis in complete silence, which was somehow more intimidating than interruption. Finally, she said, "Who taught you to read numbers like that?" "No one," I said. "I always could." She held my gaze. There was a pause long enough to make me wonder if I had just sounded arrogant. Then she said, "I'm not looking for an employee. I'm looking for a partner." I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "Can you meet tomorrow?" she asked. I looked over at Ethan sleeping in his bassinet. "Yes," I said. That lunch lasted 4 hours. Victoria did not offer me a salary. She offered me something much more dangerous and much more powerful: a stake. 20% in a new venture if I gave her my time, my analysis, my instincts, and my willingness to build from nothing. No immediate money, only possibility. A gamble. I said yes before fear could talk me out of it. That night, for reasons I couldn't fully explain, I opened LinkedIn. And there he was, Marcus Chin, Director of Acquisitions, freshly appointed at one of the more aggressive investment funds in Paris. Professional headshot, expensive suit, confident expression. The curated face of a man whose life had apparently continued upward without interruption. I scanned his network and recognized names immediately. My names, my introductions, contacts I had brought into our orbit back when I still stood beside him at dinners, conferences, and networking events. People he had met because I had the instinct to connect and he had the charm to capitalize. He had built part of his career on doors I had opened. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Not because I was devastated, because I understood something. Sooner or later, our worlds were going to collide again. This time, I would not be the vulnerable one in the room. Years passed. Not quickly. People only say that when they are looking back from safety. While living them, those years were dense, busy, hard-earned. Ethan's first tooth, first steps, first fever that terrified me. First day he called out for me from another room, and I heard my own purpose answer back. My company grew alongside him. Victoria and I built a reputation for precision. We were not the biggest advisory firm in the city, but we were the one people called when they needed someone to see what everyone else missed. By the time I was 32, Ethan was 3 years old and asking why about everything he saw. My firm had my maiden name again, Laurent and Vidal Advisory. Clean, formal, mine. Then one Tuesday morning, Victoria walked into my office carrying a red file. "We have an opportunity," she said. "Distressed fund, good assets, weak management, undervalued, ideal takeover conditions." She put the file on my desk. I opened it, and the name on the first page made my chest tighten. Lumiere Capital. A private joke from another life. Marcus had once told me the name came from the restaurant where we had our first date. He had loved the memory so much, he used it for his earliest business project. Apparently, the name had stayed. I turned the page. Organizational chart. Chief Executive Officer, Marcus Chen. I set the file down carefully and looked out the window for a few seconds, because old versions of pain can still flare before discipline takes over. Then I turned back to Victoria. "We take this file," I said. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "You know someone there?" "Yes." "Is that a problem?" "No," I said. "It's leverage." She smiled in that small, precise way she had when she sensed a meaningful shift in the room. She never pushed for confessions. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. The meeting was scheduled for 72 hours later. In 3 days, I was going to sit across from the man who had taken my kidney, my apartment, my contacts, my marriage, and my faith in friendship. And this time, he would need my approval. The conference room was on the 12th floor, all glass and cold light and expensive restraint. I arrived 5 minutes early and took my seat at the head of the table. My team arranged documents. My pulse was steady. That surprised me. Maybe healing is not the absence of memory. Maybe it is the ability to remember without shaking. Marcus entered last. He was looking at his phone when he walked in. He sat down, murmured something to an assistant, reached for a pen, and began his polished executive introduction without really looking up. Then his eyes moved across the room and landed on me. He kept speaking for a second longer than he should have, because the brain always tries denial before acceptance. Then he stopped. I watched recognition move through him in stages. Confusion. Focus. Shock. A tightening jaw. A slight change in breathing. "Lee," he said. The room went still. I met his gaze calmly. "Ms. Laurent, if you don't mind." That hit harder than anger would have. He swallowed. We continued. For the next hour, I dismantled his numbers in front of his own team with complete professionalism. They had inflated projections, buried debt exposure, overstated the resilience of their real estate holdings. On page 14, I pointed out a depreciation assumption so optimistic it bordered on fiction. Their adjusted value dropped dramatically under realistic rate pressure. One of his deputies tried to respond. Marcus stopped him. He kept looking at me like a man trying to solve a problem that should not exist. Who was I to him now? An ex-wife? A ghost? A threat? A woman he had once underestimated who now held the valuation knife over his company? All of the above, probably. When the meeting ended, handshakes happened quickly, efficiently, professionally. I did not offer him mine. In the hallway, while waiting for the elevator, he followed me out. "Please," he said quietly. "I didn't know it was you." "I know. I mean, your firm, your name. I didn't connect it." "I believe you." He looked almost relieved that I hadn't immediately cut him apart. Then he made the mistake of trying to turn the moment personal. "Are you okay?" I looked at him. Not with rage. Rage is too intimate, too revealing. "With what?" I asked. His face shifted. Camille and I, he exhaled. It's been bad for a long time. I made mistakes. I turned fully toward him then. Marcus, I am not here to discuss your marriage. I am here because your fund is worth acquiring, and I am in a position to help decide whether that happens. The only thing I need from you is competence and signatures. The elevator opened. I stepped inside. He put his hand against the door before it could close. I think about what I did, he said. I held his gaze for one last second. Good, I said. Think about it again when you sign. The doors shut. I thought that would be enough for one day. It wasn't. Down in the lobby, I saw a woman standing near reception. Very pregnant. Brown hair, beige coat. Camille. She turned when she heard my heels on the tile, and the expression on her face was not guilt. Not exactly. It was fear sharpened by urgency. We need to talk, she said. There are things you need to know. About Marcus, about me, about everything. We crossed the street to a cafe. She wrapped both hands around a cup she barely drank from. Her fingers trembled. For once, she wasn't performing softness. She looked genuinely unstable, like someone who had finally realized the floor beneath her was not solid. For 2 years, she said, Marcus has been hiding money. Offshore accounts, transfers. I don't know everything, but I know he's preparing for something. And when it's over, I won't be in the plan anymore. I said nothing. She mistook my silence for permission and kept going. I know what you think of me, she said. You're right. But right now I need help, and you're the only person smart enough to understand how serious this is. I leaned back and let her talk. And then, over the next 20 minutes, she confessed everything. Not elegantly, not in one clean narrative. Confession rarely arrives like that. It came in bursts, spirals, half sobs, fragments that connected into a shape more monstrous the longer it stood. She had loved Marcus for years, since our early 20s, maybe earlier. She knew it was wrong, she said. She hated herself for it, she said. But instead of stepping back, she stepped closer. She learned about his illness from a mutual friend who worked near the hospital system before I knew. Instead of warning me, she went to Marcus first. I told him, she admitted, staring into her coffee, that if anyone would save him, it would be you. That you'd do anything for him, that you wouldn't even need to be asked. My hands were very still on the table. She kept going. I suggested that he let you discover the severity naturally. I knew you would volunteer. I knew you'd choose it. I knew surgery would slow you down. I knew you'd be physically vulnerable for months. She couldn't quite finish the sentence after that. She didn't need to. During my recovery, while I was weak, she positioned herself closer. The affair had not lasted 4 months. It had lasted 14. 14 months. That meant before the surgery, before the diagnosis had fully reshaped our lives. Maybe before some of the tears, before some of the gratitude, before some of the promises. When I asked her how long they had been together by the time I opened that bedroom door, she answered without looking at me.
14 months.
The room around us seemed to recede. She admitted the secret wedding, too. She had pressured Marcus, given him an ultimatum. Marry me before Leah fully recovers, or I walk. She had been afraid he would change his mind once I was strong again. Afraid he might drift back toward loyalty, guilt, history. Whatever you want to call the weak flicker of conscience men like Marcus sometimes confuse for love. All the while, my phone lay face down on the table in recording mode. I had started it the moment she said there were things I needed to know. When she finally stopped talking, I picked up the phone, turned it over, and pressed stop. Her eyes widened. "You recorded me?" "Yes." "For what?" I slipped the phone into my bag and stood. For now, nothing. Her mouth opened, closed. I looked at her, really looked at her. Not as the child version of my best friend, or the woman in my bed, or the architect of my suffering, but as a person discovering that consequence has finally arrived. "You broke my life," I said quietly. "Now you're terrified someone will do the same to yours. That's symmetry." Then I left. That evening, the daycare called. A staffing problem. They couldn't keep Ethan the next day. I would have to bring him to the office. Ordinarily, that would have been stressful but manageable. The complication was timing. Marcus had another meeting in my building at 10. Our worlds were about to collide in a way I had spent 3 years preventing. The next morning, my assistant watched Ethan while I handled calls. For a little while, everything was fine. Then, as 3-year-olds do, he found a gap in adult attention and took it. 30 seconds. That's all it took. 30 seconds for him to run down the hallway at full speed, turn a corner, and crash directly into someone. I heard the little thud first, then Ethan's tiny voice. "Sorry, mister." I stepped out into the hall. Marcus was crouched down in front of him automatically, one hand half extended, checking whether the child was hurt before his mind had caught up to the moment. Ethan was fine. He had that serious little expression children wear when they know they've done something wrong, but also assume the world is basically forgiving. "I was running," Ethan explained solemnly. Marcus gave a faint smile. "I can see that." Then he really looked at him, and everything changed. I saw it happen in real time. The smile vanished first. Then his face drained. Ethan had his eyes, his jawline, even the tiny habit of tilting his head sideways when processing a new face. Marcus looked up at me slowly. I did not move. "This is Ethan," I said. His voice was barely there. "How old is he?" 3. The hallway went silent in a way that felt almost sacred and almost violent at once. He stood up too fast. "Why didn't you tell me?" My answer had been waiting years to be spoken. "Because you married my best friend 3 weeks after betraying me while I was recovering from surgery. Because you did not deserve that truth before I was strong enough to survive your reaction." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My assistant came down the hall and gently took Ethan's hand, leading him back toward the conference room. Ethan waved once at Marcus with the casual kindness children offer strangers who seem harmless. Marcus didn't wave back. His hands were shaking. "Do you—" he began, then stopped and pressed a hand against his chest. His face changed color so quickly it frightened me. "Marcus?" He took one step backward and collapsed. After that, the day dissolved into noise. Emergency responders, security, someone asking for room, a medic kneeling beside him, another lifting his shirt, attaching monitors, papers, voices, controlled urgency. They got him to the hospital fast. In the middle of that chaos, one of the doctors looked at me and asked, "You're the original donor?" "Yes." "He's showing signs of rejection. We need your full medical file immediately." Rejection. The transplanted kidney, my kidney, was turning on him. Or rather, his body was turning on it. For a moment, the irony was so sharp it almost made me sway. The organ I had given to save his life was now part of the crisis threatening it. As they wheeled him out, Marcus caught my wrist. His grip was weak but desperate. For everything, he whispered. I'm sorry. For every part of it. I looked at him, and what I felt in that moment was not triumph, not revenge, not even pity. Clarity. I know, I said. Then I gently freed my hand. Within an hour, I had sent every medical document they needed. Not for him, for Ethan. Because whatever Marcus had become, he was still my son's father, and I would not let my child grow up under the shadow of a death I could have helped prevent. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Marcus survived. And while he was in recovery, another piece of the board shifted. Victoria called me. Camille Chen has contacted banking partners and tried to freeze Lumiere Capital assets before the acquisition closes. I closed my eyes. Of course. She had not come to me out of remorse. She had come because she knew Marcus was losing control, knew the acquisition was closing in, and wanted to grab what she could before the structure changed hands. She had tried to use me one last time, as a witness, as leverage, maybe as a shield. But this time, I had the recording. I sent the audio to Victoria's attorney immediately. Camille's own words became evidence of fraud, manipulation, and bad faith interference in an active acquisition process. The attempted freeze was challenged. The banks reversed course. The legal trap snapped shut around the woman who had once thought herself the smartest person in every room. A few days later, when Marcus was stable enough to understand more than pain and medication, his lawyer played the recording for him. All of it. The 14-month affair, the timing, the coaching, the illness, the ultimatum. When I visited afterward, he was staring at the white ceiling like a man who had finally run out of ways to lie to himself. She manipulated both of us, he said. I stood near the window, not close enough for intimacy. Yes, I said, she did. He swallowed. That doesn't excuse me. No. I should have protected you. Yes. Silence filled the room. Then he said Ethan's name softly, like a person testing whether he has the right to say it. I turned to face him. Ethan needs a father, I said, not a husband for me, not a second chance for us, a father for him. If you are capable of being that, the door is open. Only that door. He closed his eyes. Maybe from relief, maybe from shame, probably both. But between you and me, I continued, that ended a long time ago. We both know it. He did not argue. Because there are some truths even cowards recognize when they're too tired to fight. Camille left Paris a few weeks later. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't care. The acquisition of Lumiere Capital closed. Victoria and I expanded again. Marcus stayed on for a transition period under oversight, not power. I watched him adapt to a world where his signature no longer carried the same weight, where charm could not erase documentation, where accountability was not an abstract principle, but a daily fact. He met Ethan properly for the first time on a Sunday morning in a park. There was a red kite, a blue sky washed clean by overnight rain. I stayed at a distance while Ethan laughed and ran, and Marcus followed him with the uncertain concentration of a man trying not to ruin the one sacred thing he'd been unexpectedly allowed to touch. At one point, Ethan handed him the spool string with complete trust. Children do that. They don't understand history. They only understand presence. Marcus looked over once, toward me. I gave no smile, no encouragement, just permission. That was enough. If you've made it this far, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me to the end, because the final part of this story isn't about revenge at all. It's about what winning actually looks like after people try to break you. That evening, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat on the drive home. I parked outside my building and sat there for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My building. Not a sublet studio. Not a shared asset under legal threat. Not a space haunted by compromise. Mine. I had bought it after our firm's second major expansion. It was larger than anything I'd once imagined having alone, and every document attached to it carried one name only: mine. I looked at Ethan sleeping with his cheek pressed against the car seat and thought about the woman I had been 4 years earlier. The woman sitting on the floor of a hallway after finding her husband in bed with her best friend. The woman with one kidney missing, a marriage gone, no job, an apartment under dispute, and a child she had just learned she was carrying. That woman had less than she started with in every measurable way. Less certainty, less health, less money, less trust. And yet she had still become me. People talk about revenge as if it always needs to be loud, public, punitive, something with witnesses and spectacle. But the older I get, the more I think the purest form of revenge is disobedience. To refuse to collapse the way they expected. To refuse to become bitter in the way that would make their story about you convenient. To refuse to spend your whole life circling the wound they gave you. I did not win because Marcus suffered. I did not win because Camille fled. I did not win because the truth came out. Those were consequences, not victory. I won because I rebuilt a life that did not require the people who broke it. I won because my son knows safety in my voice. I won because I learned how to sit across from betrayal without shrinking. I won because I stopped confusing love with sacrifice and loyalty with self-erasure. For years, I had believed that being a good woman meant giving until someone else was healed, stable, successful, loved enough to stand. I know better now. A good woman is not a resource. She is not a backup plan. She is not an emotional blood bank for people who intend to spend her and leave. Sometimes I still think about the night before the surgery. Marcus crying. Marcus saying he didn't deserve what I was doing. Me answering, "Because I love you." Was that answer foolish? Maybe. But I won't insult the younger version of myself by calling her stupid for loving sincerely. She wasn't stupid. She was honest in a world that rewarded performance. She was generous in the presence of people who calculated. She was real. The shame belongs to the ones who exploited that, not to the one who gave. And if there is one thing I would tell anyone listening who sees themselves in any part of my story, it's this: pay attention to who benefits from your goodness. Pay attention to who calls your self-sacrifice beautiful while never offering any of their own. Pay attention to who always seems to be nearby when you are weakest, especially if they gain something from staying there. Not every betrayal begins with desire. Some begin with opportunity. Some begin with envy. Some begin with a quiet decision made by someone smiling in your kitchen while memorizing the weak points in your life. Camille didn't steal Marcus because he was some grand prize. That's not what happened. She wanted what I had because she could not build the same thing inside herself. She wanted the role, the symbol, the victory, the proof that she could take and still be chosen. And Marcus wanted comfort, admiration, ease, and a version of himself that didn't have to feel indebted to the woman who saved him. Some men cannot bear the weight of being loved that deeply. It confronts them with what they owe, with what they are, with what they are not. So they move toward the person who asks less of their character. That used to make me sad. Now it only makes sense. Years from now, Ethan may ask questions. Children always do. He may ask why his father wasn't there in the beginning. why our family was built in pieces, why there are old photographs missing from shelves and no stories about certain people. And when he does, I won't poison him with my pain. I won't hand him bitterness like inheritance. I'll tell him what is true, that people are flawed, that some betrayals are deliberate, that adults sometimes make selfish choices and call them confusion, that he was always loved, that his mother stood up, that his father, when finally given the chance, tried to become better than the man he had been. Because that part is also true. Marcus did not become my great love story again. He did not earn his way back into my heart. That door stayed closed. But as a father, slowly, imperfectly, he showed up. He learned Ethan's routines. He remembered favorite snacks. He attended school events and pediatric appointments, and the small, mundane rituals that make a child feel chosen. I watched him do it with caution at first, then with less suspicion. Not because I forgot, not because I forgave everything, but because Ethan deserved whatever goodness could still be salvaged from the wreckage adults had made. There is a difference between reconciliation and restructuring. Marcus and I never reconciled. We restructured. Boundaries instead of vows, co-parenting instead of partnership, civility instead of intimacy, truth instead of illusion. That, too, is a kind of freedom. As for me, I stopped narrating my life around the betrayal. That may sound simple, but it took years. There is a trap after pain, where your identity starts to revolve around the worst thing that happened to you. The cheated wife, the donor betrayed, the woman abandoned, the victim. Those labels can become a second prison if you let them. I refused. I became the founder, the mother, the woman whose judgment moved markets, the woman whose name opened rooms on its own, the woman who could sit at her own table and know every chair there was filled by choice, not dependency. And some nights, when the apartment is quiet and Ethan is asleep, and the city outside my window has that distant, glittering calm, I rest a hand against the scar near my abdomen. Not with regret, with remembrance. That scar is no longer about Marcus. It is evidence that I survived a version of myself that believed love meant offering your body to people who had not yet proven they could be trusted with your heart. If I could speak to that younger woman now, the one in the hospital bed, the one in the hallway, the one in the waiting room after hearing she was pregnant, I wouldn't tell her to harden. I wouldn't tell her to stop loving. I wouldn't tell her to become suspicious of everyone and everything. I would tell her this: what they take from you is not always what they keep. Sometimes they take your trust and leave you discernment. Sometimes they take your stability and leave you ambition. Sometimes they take your illusion and leave you sight. And sometimes, when they think they have reduced you to less, what they have actually done is strip away everything that was preventing you from becoming more. That is what happened to me. I lost a husband. I lost a best friend. I lost a home. I lost a job. I lost the version of my future I thought was guaranteed. And yes, I lost a kidney. But I gained a son. I gained a company. I gained my own name back. I gained the ability to recognize manipulation before it reaches my doorstep. I gained the kind of self-respect that cannot be seduced by apologies arriving too late. So no, the story did not end with me destroying them. It ended with me outgrowing them. And maybe that is the most unbearable ending of all, for people who thought your role in their life was to remain broken by what they did. Because I didn't. I stood up. I carried my child. I built my future. I walked back into rooms I had every reason to avoid and made them mine. Some women fall and never rise again. I understand that. I don't judge it. Pain can be heavy enough to bury a person. But me? I rose with one kidney, a baby in my arms, and nothing left to lose except fear. And once fear was gone, there was no stopping me.